So now we can go and add more detail into the scene, and of course it's just as simple as creating polygon cuboids, extruding door frames in, things like that. But we can find out what's going on here. It'll also help us establish what's going on. So I'm just going to use a visual cue from there and draw a cuboid roughly that size, and then drag it up to be roughly the height of that. And we've only just quickly knocked that into place, but we can quickly see that if I was to move it backwards and forwards, that it matches up pretty well. So I mean, you can do this in lots of different ways. Obviously we've got an angled roof here. It's higher on one side and comes down to a lower at the other end, but you could create new ones or just duplicate that one and move it further down, so the next one's not as high, just a little fence. So you can go in and just start moving it on like a face level. Just start moving them up and down and just editing your geometry. So pick this end face, just get that end of the wall, and get the top still a little bit too high on that one, so pick it, just drop it down. And obviously when you come to model more detail, you can start extruding in and doing things like doorways and such like, but for now simple primitive shapes will suffice. Again, go back to object mode, and again we can duplicate that one, move it further down to the next wall, and all of the time when we're doing this we can see that our match is pretty good. The lines of perspective are working for us. If this was to reveal any errors, then you could quite happily go in and make those changes that you need. If it was needed a slight rotation, you could unlock, and again duplicate, move further down. And obviously the data you have on these buildings further down the street is a little bit patchy, so your objects, you can really look into this in a bit more detail, but to be honest, for what we're going to do, we don't really need to have that much detail. Actually, I'll just extend this one out. So you might need to spend a little bit more detail on those items closer to you, but the ones far off in the distance, extend that edge up, move that in, and you can see we're starting to get in the edge of that building. The angle's a little bit wrong there, so move that up just a little bit, like so. So you get an idea. There's actually going to be some depth in the top of this pitched roof. It's not a sharp edge, obviously, so what would actually be better to do would be to extrude this out a little bit and just add a little lip around there. I'm not going to bother for this though. You can put that effort in if you want to, but we can start to see this back alley starting to take shape. So if you can go in and add more and more detail, put in the fence, put in the lamppost, just out of it. I mean, you can model this basic polygon geometry, no problem. I mean, all we're going to do is, in the example we showed you, a shark come up the street, casting a shadow here and occasionally on the wall. So you don't need that much detail in the, right into the depths of the image. Here we do. But one thing we might have to do, you can model really simple polygon shapes, no problem, but just a little tip that you could use for this is it can be difficult to determine the depth and the dimensions of cylindrical objects like this. You could always use an aim constraint so that the axis of this is pointing directly at the center of the camera, so you can move it backwards and forwards from the camera's position. Actually, we'll just go to the Sony Cam, and if you look at the top here, we have our first, second, and it's just somewhere in the middle of the third building. So first, second, third. So the lamppost is roughly about here, which is not a bad shot actually. And we can drag it up, or we could extend it up and then bring the subdivisions in later. So if we go to the cylinder shape, change the radius a little bit so it's a little bit big. If we can see there, that's roughly where the lamppost would be, and we won't get a true idea until we start shining lights into this scene to see if the shadows correspond. And if we subdivide it in height, and we can get a rough idea about where this should be. And looking at it, going to full screen here, the shadow isn't aligning up there, so what we need to do is move that back, and we can do it sort of back across, you know, in Z, X, Z, X, Z, X. So that's a little bit better, but again we can double check when the we can stick it into shaded mode, have a little look, and the scene is beginning to take shape. So carry on like this, and then you will have the geometry required to model a proxy scene. This kind of level of detail will suffice, but it really does depend on the job you need it to do. So what I'd like you to do to complete the task is to go through and model this environment in sort of low to medium level of detail. You'll have an idea what you fancy doing. You might just roll a ball down the street, have a pile of boxes in the street, have the sharks run up and down, or put another character or vehicle in there. But just simple forms will do. It's more about getting to grip with modeling proxy scene, getting your camera lined up and matching the lighting, which is what we'll look into in week 2. So I'm going to leave that there, and hopefully this has given you a good overview of how to get the cameras matching up. Experiment with other images. I'll put some up on the internet so you can use them, but just don't be shy to get a camera, go out, photograph some environments, use the settings, find out the camera specs, and do this again yourself using another context. But for now, I'm going to leave it there.